Hey guys, Coach Adragna here with another edition of the IU Film Room. Here to talk IU Florida State that was played about 24 hours ago from the time that I am recording this. The name of the game today is spacing. I'll talk about a few different things on the offensive end, but the main thing that I really want to talk about is spacing with the Indiana offense in this IU Film Room because I think you'll see by the end of this film room that IU actually has an opportunity, I think, to be a decent offensive team if they are able to figure out this spacing thing. I think the sets and the actions that they run are designed to have good spacing. Like I said, I think. But as we dive into these clips, we're just going to see how when they space the floor well, they pretty much get what the looks that they want. But when they do not space the floor well, that's when they really run into problems. Teams are able to contest shots at the rim. I think it's a lot of why we're seeing IU struggle to finish at the rim, especially guard wise. Is that's usually happening when spacing is poor and other guys are able to help out onto the guards at the rim. And yeah, so I'm not going to talk too much in this intro. I just want to show you guys rather. So appreciate you watching here on this IU Film Room. Like, subscribe, follow, do whatever you need to do. Appreciate you. So I'm going to do it a little bit different today and just kind of go in chronological order of the game of the clips that I have clipped. I think it's like 15-ish or so. But the first clip here that I want to talk about, it's one of the few defensive clips that I have, but it's this Race Thompson closeout here. So IU is a pack line defense team, meaning A is they play inside the pack line, which the pack line is kind of this inside three-point line. The inside one there is kind of like where the pack line's at. It means if you're off the ball, you kind of stay within that pack line there. So number one, that's number one thing in pack line defense. Number two is absolutely no baseline. So you are actually forcing the offense to the middle. As we see Race Thompson's closeout here, the way his feet are pointed, he's actually forcing his guy to go baseline. He forces his guy to go baseline, and what does that result in?
Get a second effort.
That results in a dunk and kind of sets the tone for Florida State. Immediate timeout from Archie Miller where he ripped into his guys. And, yeah, not a great start from IU. Not a great closeout there from Race Thompson. I want to give props to the IU coaching staff on this one because something they obviously picked up on film of Leonard Hamilton teams over the year, but obviously of this Florida State team and the other game that they had played this season, is that they switch pretty much all screens. So what Archie and staff did to kind of give themselves an advantage on this all switching is I want you to look at this here because this is an action IU has not run this season, and that's a double ball screen for the ball handler. So you see Al here setting a ball screen on Finney's man, and then you see Trace here setting a ball screen. So why did IU do that? Because as you can see, number 23 here was guarding Finney. He gets screened. So now IU thought they had a mismatch here with Trace and number 2. So now for about a split second, number 2 is guarding Robert Finney. But Trace is there to screen number 2 almost immediately. So now what does that do? It creates a couple different mismatches. It now has the Florida State center on Robert Finney, and it has where IU thinks they have their best mismatch with number 2 guarding Trace Jackson Davis. So what exactly does this result in on this play?
Texas
results in a clear out. Rob gets fouled going to the basket, 2 shots. So this clip here is actually going to kind of accentuate a couple different things that I want to talk about throughout this video. Number one is the switching aspect that I just talked about. And number two is the spacing aspect that I said a lot of this video is going to be about. So number one, you just see this little action here where Trace just kind of sets a little rub screen on Al Durham. Florida State is actually switching that. So number 5, who is Florida State's center and not a great on-the-ball defender, ends up on Al Durham almost immediately, and you end up with a guard on Trace Jackson Davis, which is a great thing. But what I want to talk about here is, all right, so Al's got the ball. He's got a center on him. So now you've got Finney, who just kind of continues running the play. You're going to see him cut to the opposite block. But at this point right here, so he should see Al is driving, and he should vacate that lane and get out of there. It's easier to say when you're slowing it down, but we see Rob right here. It creates really bad space for. I mean, Al's got a straight line drive here. I mean, he's got his guy on his hip already. That's a straight line drive. That's an easy 2 points if Finney is able to vacate that lane. But Finney just kind of stays, actually finishes a cut all the way through the lane. Now Finney's man is able to help out on Rob or Al. Makes this a much more difficult shot. Al misses a layup. Now, I do want to point out, Al needs to make that. He's a senior. He's got to finish that layup. But some poor spacing, not all Finney's fault. He's running part of the offense. But, again, poor spacing resulted in that not being a wide-open layup. While we're on the topic of spacing, there was a stretch in this first half with around like 11 minutes to, 9 or 10 minutes left in the first half, where I thought IU spacing was as good as I had seen it all season, and they were able to get great looks off of that spacing. So the first thing being is this little action here. It's just a simple ball screen with Race Thompson. So you see Race is setting this screen here for Armand. So Race sets this screen here. They know that they're switching this screen. Normally when IU runs this little ball screen action, they've got a big guy that's parked right on the ball or on the block that the ball handler is headed toward, right there. Well, what you'll see here from Jerome Hunter is he actually lifts. He's getting higher. So what does that make? What happens there? That means this guy's got to go higher with him. You're going to see Lander is raising up. So what this does is it's going to create a lot of open space here for IU to operate. There's a lot of different things that can happen. Now, what we see happen here is an excellent roll to the basket from Race Thompson, an excellent pass from Armand Franklin, but this pass is only able to be made because Jerome Hunter lifts and his man isn't there to help and take away this bounce pass.
And then you had Gray going down to the post.
Excellent spacing there from the Hoosiers. So like I mentioned, this was a really good stretch of spacing for IU. So now we've got very next possession. You've got IU with great space. So we see. So right here, you see Landers trying to vacate. He's trying to get space. Now you've got Florida State scrambling. Galloway gets it. Great extra pass to Jerome Hunter. Knocks down the three. So I just want you to see the spacing and movement of this possession right here. There's only one guy working the inside. Guys are able to drive into space, and therefore Indiana gets a wide open look, and surprisingly, they knock down a three. Although Jerome Hunter is a good three-point shooter. He's the best one on the team probably. But he steps in and he's able to knock that one down. Sticking with the theme of space here, I want you to see something that I really like and you don't always see. So let's pause it right here. All right, so Armand Franklin gets the ball. A lot of times with IU, you're going to have, especially with this lineup, you're going to have Trace Jackson Davis parked on one of these blocks here, and you're going to have Race Thompson parked on one of these blocks here. They're both bigs. They both play inside. They both score inside. But that's not the case on this offensive possession. Instead, you've got Race spaced out. That was a crazy line. You've got Finney spaced out, and he's actually going to create more space. And you've got Trace on the opposite, what they would call dunker spot. And why that's so important is because if Armand drives this ball, newsflash, he does, and this guy decides he wants to leave Trace, then you've just got to lob up to Trace because he's on that opposite side block. So this is great space from Indiana. I mean, you could screen capture this, and this is about as good a spacing as you'll see Indiana have all season. And what exactly does it result in?
And he's playing his best basketball right now.
Layup, two shots for Armand Franklin. Wish he finished that, but great spacing leads to free throws for Armand Franklin. So next possession down, what do we see? Indiana's going to run what we call a Spain pick and roll. Spain pick and roll is where I talked about it in my last IU film room. Trace is going to set this ball screen here, and then Al is going to set a screen on Trace's man, and Trace is going to roll to the basket for a lob. So what we see here, what actually should happen, which should have been drilled into IU, is so Florida State is switching, right? So Finney is coming off of this screen from Trace Jackson Davis, which means this guy is actually supposed to be guarding Finney at this point. This guy, number 2, will be guarding Trace Jackson Davis. And Armaan Franklin's guy, after he sets his back screen for Trace, should be switching on to Trace. So what actually should have happened here is Al should have lifted up and just screened his own man. And it's probably a lob for Trace. But with that said, Trace actually has a wide open opportunity at a lob that I think they missed out on because Florida State got confused in this action. I wish Indiana would have gone back to this action more. But nonetheless, we see right here that ball should be lobbed right now. However, it's not. So what we still see is Indiana still got great space. So you see Trace Jackson Davis is down low. He's sealing his man off. There is a wide open lane right here. And if this guy wants to commit, that ball is kicked out to Armaan Franklin, then he's got a driving lane. So no matter what, Indiana's got Florida State right where they want them here because they have great space. What does it result in? 2 points for Indiana. So we've talked about some good that I saw in Indiana's spacing that I saw in their offense. A couple things of the bad. So we're 16 minutes into the game at this point. Archie Miller and staff, they obviously had game plan for Florida State switching everything. And with that said, I have no idea why they run this play. Because, let's see. Trace Jackson Davis just set a back screen for Armaan Franklin. Trace Jackson Davis now has Florida State's point guard guarding him. What this should be is everybody get the heck out of the way, park Trace's butt right on whatever block that he wants to go on, and feed him the basketball and force Florida State to make another switch, and then they're caught scrambling. But instead of doing that, like I said, IU knows good and well that Florida State is switching everything. They run this little play where basically Trace goes and rescreens Armand's guy and just lets them guard who they were supposed to be guarding in the first place. I don't really understand that because, like I said, IU's coaching staff knew Florida State was going to switch everything. Yeah, here we see another pin down, and now everybody's just back guarding who they were guarding, and IU doesn't get anything out of it, which to me, it's just like, I feel like Archie Miller just had that on his play sheet and just said, all right, time to call it, which that to me is not a great thing. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be too harsh on Archie. I'm not trying to pump up his offense and say he's got great spacing. He's the best coach ever. I'm just trying to be real and be a realist here on these clips. And in this situation, I don't really understand why IU ran this play. So I was touting all that great space that IU had at one point, and that's when we saw them have really, really good looks. Now, I want you to watch this possession in particular, or this 5 to 10 seconds or whatever it is of a clip. So I just want you to look. Look, Trey Galloway has a decent opportunity to drive there, I suppose. But when he gets into the paint, what is he supposed to do in this situation? You've got a guy standing. You've got a guy standing, not even in his vantage point, really. You've got two guys in those passing lanes to where, regardless of what Galloway does here, Finney and Durham are out of the picture. And you've got a guy parked on the block, a guy parked on the block. It's the opposite. It's like the antithesis of what IU had done just 2 or 3 minutes prior. Poor spacing, and nothing comes of it. So I touted the good spacing, but there was bad spacing as well. And like I said, not really a lot Galloway can do with it there. Not a lot for IU. So as much as they had good spacing, there was a lot of bad spacing as well. And I think that's where we see IU go into those droughts, is when the spacing is really bad. So what I accidentally cut off at the beginning of this clip was Trace Jackson Davis at the start of this clip had just got done setting a ball screen for Rob Finney. So this guy right here is Florida State's center. This guy right here is Florida State's point guard. So what this has done, this has created a mismatch for Indiana. But I want you to look at the spacing. You've got Jerome Hunter spaced out here on the perimeter. You've got Galloway spaced on the perimeter. You've got Armand spaced on the perimeter. And you've got Trace working a ball side block. So Indiana's got good spacing. They've got a big man on a guard. They've got opportunities here. And what do we see? We see Finney's able to take his man off the bounce. Now, because there's good spacing, it's basically a one-on-one between Trace Jackson Davis and the guard that was guarding him. So what do we see? Trace is able to get an easy rebound, go up, foul, 2 shots for Indiana. So great space and creating a mismatch there is what allowed IU to get fouled and have an opportunity at 2 points. Trying to see if I can beat the world record for the number of times I can say space in one video. But again, this was another one where IU had a great opportunity because of good space.
Defense
Trey
trying
sets
to
a ball
punch it
screen.
out.
Pause it right here. You've got guy in the corner, got guy in the corner, guy in the wing, all completely spaced beyond the perimeter. You've got a two-man game with the ball screen. Two guys go to guard one. So now you've got one, two, three guys with only two able to guard here on Florida State. Somebody's going to be open. They make the mistake of making it Trace Jackson Davis. Results in a dunk. Great space, results in 2 points and a Trace Jackson Davis dunk for the Hoosiers. This was a play I really liked because I don't even know if it was on purpose by Trace Jackson Davis. It is an action that a lot of NBA teams run when there's ball screen switches. But basically, Trace sets his ball screen. There's a switch, and now Al is going to drive right on his hip, and Trace is basically able to just screen his own man. By screening his own man there, Al gets a wide open lane to the basket, 2 points. Not to mention it was good spacing, but what I really liked was that Trace Jackson Davis had the wherewithal to screen his own man, create a wide open driving lane for Armand. When we talk about good spacing, sometimes it's as subtle as just a few feet and things that you don't really notice when you're watching. You're just like, man, why can't IU score? Or why did he shoot that bad shot? But I want to show you something here. So when we looked at IU's good spacing, what do we see? We saw guy in the corner, guy in the corner, guy in the wing spaced, big man down low that's able to work the blocks with a lot of space in the paint. What is that missing? Race Thompson right here. So he's just, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet uh, inside the arc, but that makes all the difference, especially on this play. And it's not, like I said, it's subtle, but I want you to watch Armand drive. Now, if Race is out here, his man is also pulled a little bit farther out. And if his man's pulled farther out, Finney's probably able to take one more dribble and finish this. However, watch Race's man. He's the one that causes Finney to pick up his dribble and take a tough shot. And it's all because he's not spaced properly, and it's just by a few feet.
Some people don't even want to hear it. But
That's Race's guy on the contest. Finney misses the shot, and Florida State's off to the races. Now, on the flip side, you see here, Indiana's got good spacing. Really, Al's got a wide open lane here to drive. He's got his man beat. So now it's basically up to this man to make a decision. Is he going to try to stop the ball, or is he going to try to stop Trace? His man decides he's going to try and stop the ball, and it results in a great pass from Al, great spacing by Trace, dump off, 2 points for Indiana. So at this point in the game, Indiana is tied with under 2 minutes left. Every possession at this point is extremely crucial. Indiana's got to have their best execution down the stretch. And what we see here is not exactly that, but there's something really subtle that kind of throws this whole thing awry that you probably don't notice just while you're watching at first glance. And it's this. So we watch Al drive. All right, so Al drives. At this point, Florida State had to converge on Al there. So you've got a guy guarding Trace. You've got a guy guarding Al. You've got two guys kind of guarding Race right here. So you've got one guy that's kind of trying to make a decision. Am I going to guard Armand or am I going to guard Finney? So he kind of decides to take Finney, but Finney at this point has a driving lane. All right, he's got a driving lane that he's able to occupy. But I want you to watch Al here, because instead of going to find space and creating space by probably exiting out this way and going to this corner and having his man follow, Al unfortunately stands. And by standing, I want you to watch the man guarding him, number 10. So Al stands, he stands, he stands. Finney is now driving. I mean, this is probably 2 seconds later. This guy here is a guy that was guarding Al. And he is the one that's going to end up contesting this Finney shot that probably is a layup if Al doesn't stand there.
Finney in tighter.
So instead of 2 points, Indiana goes up in a crucial part of the game. Florida State now has a run out. So we fast forward to overtime here. And this was one that I was even screaming out when it happened because I just didn't quite understand. So Indiana, they're workhorse, they're bread and butter, not only all season, but especially in this game. Trace Jackson Davis. There's a minute 46 left. You're down by 2. So Trace sets just a little screen here.
Challenge.
Indiana, at this point, now has Florida State's probably their worst on-ball defender, guarding Robert Finney. And they've got Mouse in the house, number 4, trying to guard Trace Jackson Davis here. They've got good spacing otherwise out on the perimeter. You're in the corner here with Al. So help side defense isn't really as strong as it could be here because Indiana spaced really well. And instead of doing what he did earlier and driving this guy or parking Trace on that block and just figuring out a way to get him the ball with a little guard on him, Finney kind of just does the backup. Indiana hasn't made threes well at all in a long time. But unfortunately, Finney decides to jack one up over a 7-footer. Doesn't go in. And it's not that Finney's a terrible basketball player or that's just a god-awful shot. But in that situation, that ball has to be fed to Trace Jackson Davis. And the last play we're going to talk about here is Indiana's last offensive possession. I actually really like what Archie did here. So Hoosiers are down 2, 15 seconds left. They need a bucket, obviously. So what they do is they run this same action that they've been running the whole game. What you probably assume is going to happen if you're Florida State is that Trace is going to go set a high ball screen for Finney up there, and they're going to try to force a switch. But instead, they throw to Trace Jackson Davis in the high post. Now Trace has all of this space to operate. He's IU's best player. Give him the ball. Give him space to operate. See what he can do. Against Florida State's probably worst on-ball defender, Trace is able to get his way into the paint, gets a obvious foul, knocks down 2 free throws, ties the game up, and hopeful Indiana fans think that it's going to a second overtime. Unfortunately for the Hoosiers, that's not what happened. Florida State went down, made a shot with a couple seconds left, and won the game. But in this edition of IU Film Room, if I didn't make it obvious, I wanted to talk about space. It's so vital to any offense, but for this Indiana team, I think when they see those droughts, and those patented droughts we've seen in the Archie Miller era, I really do think a lot of it is attributed to poor spacing. I think there's promise for this IU team because a lot of times they had good space and got good looks, and goodness, they just couldn't knock shots down, they couldn't knock layups down. But I actually think that Archie has the spacing aspect, at least in theory, figured out with this Hoosiers team. Now, in practice, it's tough because Joey Brunk hasn't played yet. Race Thompson's very good down low. Trace Jackson Davis is very good down low. And that's 3 of IU's prominent players that all really like to score within 15 feet. So creating good spacing with that type of personnel is a difficult task. But I do think it still has to be things where you see guys like Race Thompson out on the perimeter. Maybe it's setting ball screens and roll replace actions, but the days of being able to park 2 guys on the blocks and calling it an offense are over. And so I think IU's onto something. There were some encouraging things I saw. Obviously, they've got to take care of the ball better. Turnovers, especially in the first half, were quite the issue. But ultimately, they got to be able to finish at the rim, and they got to be able to knock down open shots because they had a lot of great looks yesterday. Just couldn't knock them down, whether that be at the rim or outside. So don't want to keep you too long here, but as always, I appreciate you watching these film rooms. If you have any feedback, anything you want me to dive into, happy to do so. But until the next Hoosier game, I'm Tony Adragna. Thanks for watching.